The champagne flutes clinked around Grandma Rose's casket like we were celebrating instead of mourning, and that's when my Aunt Patricia's voice sliced through the reception hall like a serrated knife. "She's only here for the inheritance. She never visited Grandma." Every head turned toward me, 50 pairs of eyes, all suddenly remembering I existed. The room went so quiet I could hear my heartbeat thundering in my ears, could feel my face burning under their collective judgment. My name is Elena Martinez, and I'm 27 years old. Standing there in my discount black dress while my aunt, draped in designer mourning attire, pointed at me like I was some kind of vulture, I realized this moment had been building for years. I just hadn't seen it coming. If you want the full truth, hit like, so this story reaches more people. Let me take you back 3 months before this nightmare, before the funeral, before the accusations, before everything exploded in ways I never imagined possible. I was working double shifts at Sacred Heart Hospital, pulling 16-hour days as a nurse in the ICU. My apartment was a studio in the worst part of town. My car had 200,000 miles on it, and my student loans felt like they'd outlive me. But every spare moment I spent it with Grandma Rose, not at her mansion where the rest of the family gathered for their performative visits. No, I went to see her at Riverside Care Facility, the memory care unit where she'd been living for 2 years, the place nobody else bothered to visit because it's too depressing and she doesn't even remember us anymore, except she remembered me. Every Tuesday and Thursday evening, rain or shine, exhausted or not, I'd walk into that facility and Grandma's eyes would light up. Maybe she didn't always remember my name right away, but she knew my face, knew I was someone who loved her. We'd play cards, watch old movies, and I'd brush her hair the way she used to brush mine when I was little. The family didn't know about these visits. Why would they? They were too busy attending their charity galas, posting grief-stricken social media tributes to beloved Grandmother Rose, showing up at the mansion once a month with expensive flowers and cheaper excuses. Patricia, Dad's older sister, was the ringleader. She'd married into old money, and ever since Grandpa died 15 years ago, she'd been circling Grandma's estate like a hawk eyeing prey. Every family gathering became a performance, with Patricia playing the devoted daughter while calculating square footage and asset values. My father, weak-willed and desperate for his sister's approval, went along with everything. My cousins, bratty trust fund babies in their early 20s, couldn't be bothered to visit unless there was something in it for them. But me? I was just the struggling nurse, the family disappointment who chose a working-class profession instead of marrying well or joining the family's commercial real estate business. I was invisible to them, irrelevant, forgotten. Until Grandma Rose died. Until that funeral. Until Patricia decided to make me the villain of a story she'd been writing in her head for months. The funeral reception was at Grandma's mansion, the sprawling estate that sat on 5 acres of manicured gardens in the city's most exclusive neighborhood. Crystal chandeliers, marble floors, artwork worth more than most people's houses. The place screamed wealth and legacy. Patricia had organized everything naturally. She'd positioned herself as the grieving daughter, accepting condolences with practiced grace, directing caterers like she owned the place, which, in her mind, she probably already did. I'd arrived quietly, slipping in through the side entrance because I'd worked an overnight shift and barely made it on time. My hair was pulled back in a simple bun, my makeup minimal, my dress off the rack from Target. In a room full of designer labels and practiced elegance, I looked exactly like what I was. Exhausted, grief-stricken, and broke. Nobody acknowledged me at first. I stood near the back, watching my family perform their mourning like it was an audition. Patricia held court near the casket, dabbing at dry eyes with an embroidered handkerchief. My father stood stiffly beside her, nodding at appropriate intervals. My cousins, Madison and Trevor, were already drinking heavily, laughing too loudly for a funeral. I approached Grandma's casket alone. She looked peaceful, wearing the pearl necklace Grandpa had given her on their 50th anniversary. I wanted to tell her I loved her, wanted to thank her for every Tuesday and Thursday, every card game and movie night, every moment she'd made me feel valued when my own family treated me like background noise. That's when Patricia struck. She's only here for the inheritance. She never visited Grandma. The words hung in the air like poison gas. Every conversation stopped. Every eye found me. The judgment was immediate and brutal. "Excuse me?" I managed to choke out. Patricia turned to face me fully, her expression a masterpiece of manufactured hurt and righteous anger. "You heard me, Elena. We all know why you're here. You couldn't be bothered to visit while she was alive, but now that there's money on the table, suddenly you show up." My cousin Madison nodded enthusiastically. "Seriously, I was here all the time. I never saw you once." The lie was so audacious it took my breath away. Madison had visited the mansion exactly 3 times in 2 years, and only when she needed money for her shopping addiction. "I visited her twice a week," I said, my voice shaking, "at Riverside, at the memory care facility." Patricia's laugh was sharp and dismissive. "Oh, please, Riverside. Why would any of us go to that depressing place when she had this beautiful home?" "Because that's where she lived, Patricia, for 2 years. Where were you?" Comment exposed. If you can already see where this is going. I was here, maintaining her estate, managing her affairs, making sure everything was taken care of. Patricia gestured around the mansion like it was evidence of her devotion. Unlike some people, I understood she needed family around her, not strangers in some facility. The crowd was eating it up. I could see it in their faces. The wealthy friends and distant relatives who'd never bothered to learn my name were nodding along, believing every word. "Grandma had Alzheimer's," I said, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. "She needed specialized care. The doctors recommended what was most profitable for them." Patricia interrupted smoothly. "I wanted to bring her home, hire private nurses, let her live in dignity. But certain people convinced her that facility was better." Another lie. The doctors had been explicit. Grandma needed 24-hour memory care that couldn't be provided at home safely. Patricia had fought the placement because it meant she couldn't control access to Grandma, couldn't monitor every interaction, couldn't ensure the will stayed in her favor. "That's not what happened," I protested, but my father stepped forward, placing a hand on Patricia's shoulder in solidarity. "Elena, this isn't the time or place," he said quietly, disappointed as always. "Let's not make a scene at your grandmother's funeral." "I'm not making a scene. She's lying about—" "Enough." Patricia's voice cracked like a whip. "You've done enough damage, coming here, pretending to care, when everyone knows you abandoned her. We all know why you're really here." She let that accusation breathe, let it sink into every mind in the room. I could feel my credibility evaporating in real time, could see the sympathetic looks turning skeptical, judgmental. That's when Mr. Harrison cleared his throat. Edward Harrison had been Grandma's lawyer for 30 years. A distinguished man in his 60s, silver-haired and impeccably dressed, he'd been standing quietly near the fireplace, observing the drama with an unreadable expression. "Perhaps," he said carefully, "we should proceed with the reading of the will." Patricia's face transformed instantly, the righteous anger replaced by poorly concealed anticipation. She smoothed her dress, adjusted her posture, prepared to receive her inheritance with appropriate grace. "Yes," she said, her voice dripping with satisfaction. "Yes, I think that would be appropriate. Let's settle Mama's affairs properly." The crowd gathered in the main sitting room, arranging themselves like spectators at a play. Patricia positioned herself front and center, my father beside her. Madison and Trevor flanked them like royal guards. Other relatives and close friends filled in around them, a sea of expectant faces. I stood in the back, near the door, ready to leave the moment this humiliation was over. I didn't want Grandma's money. I never had. I'd visited her because I loved her, because she was lonely, because nobody else would. The inheritance had never even crossed my mind. Mr. Harrison opened his briefcase, withdrew a thick document and adjusted his reading glasses. The room held its collective breath. This is the last will and testament of Rose Catherine Martinez, he began formally, dated March 15th of this year, superseding all previous versions. March 15th, 3 months ago. 2 weeks after my last visit with Grandma, when she'd been having one of her good days, when she'd squeezed my hand and called me by name, and told me I reminded her of herself at my age. Patricia wasn't worried. She was smiling, actually smiling, probably already mentally redecorating the mansion. Then Mr. Harrison began to read. I, Rose Catherine Martinez, being of sound mind and body. How much did she leave me? Patricia interrupted, unable to contain herself. I've been managing everything for years. This estate alone requires constant oversight. And the investments, the properties. Mr. Harrison, what's my portion? The lawyer looked up slowly, his expression carefully neutral. In the silence that followed, I swear I could hear my own heartbeat. Mrs. Patterson, he said quietly, using Patricia's married name. Perhaps if you'd allow me to continue? Of course, of course. Patricia waved her hand magnanimously, settling back with a satisfied smile. I apologize. Please, go on. Mr. Harrison's eyes found mine across the room. Something in his expression made my stomach drop. Not pity, exactly, but a kind of anticipation that felt almost dangerous. To my daughter, Patricia Ann Patterson, I leave the following. My porcelain doll collection, valued at approximately $800, and my sincere hope that she finds the same comfort in them that she found in pretending to care about me these last years. The room went completely still. Patricia's face froze mid-smile, confusion flickering across her features like a glitching computer screen. I'm sorry, what? To my son, David James Martinez, Mr. Harrison continued, his voice steady and clear. I leave my golf clubs and the memory of every time he chose his sister's approval over his own mother's well-being. My father's face drained of color. To my granddaughter, Madison Rose Patterson, I leave $50, $1 for each time she asked me for money, and $0 for each time she visited without her hand extended. Madison gasped like she'd been slapped. To my grandson, Trevor James Patterson, I leave my collection of vintage wines, with the sincere wish that he develops better taste in both alcohol and family loyalty. Trevor started to stand, his face flushing red. This is bullshit. Sit down, Mr. Harrison said quietly, and something in his tone made Trevor obey instantly. Patricia found her voice, shrill and desperate. This is invalid. This has to be invalid. Mama wasn't in her right mind. She had Alzheimer's. She couldn't have. Mrs. Martinez was evaluated by 3 separate physicians before signing this document. Mr. Harrison interrupted calmly. All confirmed she was experiencing a period of mental clarity and was fully competent to make these decisions. The will is ironclad. Type yes, if you want to see all targets hit at once. Then who? Patricia's voice cracked. Who gets everything else? The estate? The investments? The properties? The... Everything, Mr. Harrison said, his eyes returning to mine. Goes to Elena Maria Martinez. The world tilted. I heard the words, but they didn't make sense. They couldn't make sense. The room erupted in chaos. Patricia screaming, Madison crying, Trevor shouting obscenities, my father standing frozen like a statue. Voices overlapping, accusations flying, the careful facade of family unity shattering into a million sharp pieces. But all I could think about was Tuesday evenings, about Grandma's hands in mine while we played gin rummy, about the way she'd smile when I brushed her hair, about the last thing she'd said to me 2 weeks before she died. You're the only one who sees me, Elena, the only one who ever did. This is fraud. Patricia's voice cut through the chaos like a chainsaw. She manipulated an old woman with dementia. Mrs. Patterson, I would advise you to be very careful about your next words. Mr. Harrison's voice carried steel beneath its professional courtesy. Making accusations of elder manipulation or fraud without evidence is slander, and Mrs. Martinez was very clear that such accusations might arise. That's why she took extraordinary precaution. He produced a tablet from his briefcase, tapped the screen, and turned it toward the room. Grandma's face appeared, sitting in what I recognized as the Riverside Facilities consultation room. The timestamp read, March 15th, the same date as the will. She looked tired but alert, her eyes clear in a way they hadn't been for months. "My name is Rose Catherine Martinez," Grandma said on the video, her voice steady. "I'm making this recording in the presence of my attorney, Edward Harrison, and Dr. Sarah Chen, my primary physician at Riverside Care Facility. I want to make my intentions regarding my estate absolutely clear so that no one can claim I wasn't of sound mind or that I was manipulated." Patricia made a choking sound. Madison was crying openly now, mascara streaming down her face. "For the last 2 years I've been living with Alzheimer's disease," Grandma continued. "I have good days and bad days. Today is a good day, which is why we're doing this now. I want to talk about my family, my real family, and the people who pretended to be." She paused, gathering herself, and I saw the woman I remembered from childhood, fierce, intelligent, unwilling to accept bullshit from anyone. "My daughter Patricia hasn't visited me once since I was moved to Riverside, not once in 2 years. She calls occasionally, always when my nurse is present so she can claim she checked on me. She's maintained my empty mansion like a shrine to herself, hosting parties and posting photos pretending I still live there. She's been planning my funeral since before I was dead." Someone in the crowd gasped. Patricia's face had gone from red to white, her mouth opening and closing soundlessly. "My son David has called me exactly 14 times in 2 years. I counted. He sends flowers on my birthday and Christmas. Always expensive, always guilt offerings for his absence. He chose his sister's approval over his own mother's company, and that's a choice he'll have to live with." My father was crying now, silent tears tracking down his face, but he didn't move, didn't speak. "My grandchildren asked me for money 47 times between them. They visited precisely 6 times, always needing something. Money for Madison's shopping addiction, bail money for Trevor's DUI, endless requests and zero genuine care." Grandma's expression softened then, and even through the recording I could feel her love radiating outward. "But my granddaughter Elena visited me every Tuesday and Thursday evening for 2 years. She worked 16-hour shifts and still came to play cards with me. She brushed my hair like I used to brush hers. She never asked for anything except my company. She was there when I couldn't remember her name, patient when I repeated the same stories, kind when the disease made me confused and frightened. Share this video so communities understand what was hiding." The video continued, Grandma's voice filling the silent room like a ghost speaking from beyond the grave. "Elena doesn't know I'm doing this. She's never asked about my will, never hinted about inheritance, never treated me like a bank account with a pulse. She loved me when I had nothing left to give except broken memories and confusion. That's why she gets everything. Not because she deserves a reward, but because she's the only one who loved me without expecting anything in return." Patricia lunged forward, grabbing the tablet from Mr. Harrison's hands. He didn't stop her. She stared at the screen, her face contorting with rage and disbelief as Grandma kept speaking. "Patricia will say this is unfair. She'll claim she maintained my estate, managed my affairs, was a devoted daughter. What she won't mention is that she fought against my move to Riverside because it meant she couldn't control who visited me. She wanted me isolated at the mansion where she could monitor every interaction, every conversation. She was terrified I'd change my will, and she was right to be." "This is insane," Patricia whispered, but there was no conviction in her voice anymore. "This is—" "Dr. Chen is here to confirm my mental state," Grandma said on the recording. "Dr. Patel, my neurologist, has reviewed my cognitive tests from this morning, and Dr. Williams, my primary care physician for 30 years, has submitted a written statement. I am of sound mind. This is my choice. And if anyone contests this will, I've instructed Mr. Harrison to release something else." Mr. Harrison reached into his briefcase again. Patricia's eyes went wide. "Don't," she said quickly. "Edward, you don't need to." These are transcripts, he said quietly, producing another folder, of every phone conversation Mrs. Martinez had with family members over the last 2 years. She began recording them 6 months before her diagnosis, when her own daughter started asking pointed questions about the estate distribution. He opened the folder, selected a page at random. This is from April 18th, 2 years ago. Patricia Patterson calling Rose Martinez. He cleared his throat and read, Patricia. Mother, we need to discuss your assets. David and I are concerned about estate taxes. Rose. I'm fine, Patricia. I don't need... Patricia. This isn't about what you need. This is about protecting family wealth. We need to establish a trust, transfer property titles, ensure everything's properly distributed before... Rose. Before I die? Patricia. Before complications arise. The room was a tomb. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Mr. Harrison selected another page. This is from September 3rd, 2 years ago. Same parties. Patricia. The mansion is too much for you to manage alone. You should sign over the property management to me. Just temporarily, of course. Rose. Patricia, I'm 78. Not incompetent. Patricia. Mother, please don't make this difficult. We're trying to help you. Enough! Patricia's voice was raw, desperate. We've heard enough. This is a violation of privacy, illegal recording. Single-party consent state. Mr. Harrison replied calmly. Perfectly legal. And there are 73 more conversations just like these. Would you like me to continue? Patricia sat down heavily, her face the color of ash. I couldn't move. The inheritance, the money, the estate, none of it felt real. What felt real was the vindication, the proof that I hadn't been crazy, that Grandma had seen what I'd seen, that all those quiet evenings together had mattered more than I'd ever imagined. Now, Mr. Harrison said, his voice cutting through the stunned silence, let me outline the specifics of the estate that now belongs to Elena Martinez. He pulled out another document, this one thick enough to be a novel. The primary residence and surrounding 5 acres, currently valued at $12 million. The vacation property in Aspen, valued at $4 million. The commercial real estate portfolio, generating approximately $600,000 in annual rental income. The investment portfolio, currently valued at $8 million. The classic car collection, valued at $1.2 million. And various other assets bringing the total estate value to approximately $28 million. Someone in the crowd actually gasped. I felt dizzy. All of it, Mr. Harrison continued, his eyes finding mine again, goes to Elena, free and clear. No trusts, no conditions, no strings attached. Mrs. Martinez was very specific about that. She wanted Elena to have complete freedom to do whatever she wished with the inheritance. Patricia stood up slowly, her whole body shaking. This is wrong. This is so fundamentally wrong, I can't even... She wheeled on me, her face twisted with hatred. You manipulated her. You isolated her in that facility. You poisoned her mind against her own family. I loved her, I said quietly, and my voice carried in the silent room. That's all I did. I loved her. Love? Patricia laughed, a sound like breaking glass. You loved her money. You saw a lonely old woman and you saw an opportunity. You played the long game, playing cards and watching movies, all while whispering in her ear that her real family didn't care about her. I never mentioned any of you, I said, my voice stronger now. Not once. I never had to. Grandma saw the truth herself every time she asked when you were coming to visit, and the answer was never. We were busy, Madison shrieked from across the room. We had lives. Not everyone can afford to waste time playing cards with your own grandmother? I finished. Yeah, I noticed. Mr. Harrison held up a hand. There's one more item to address. Mrs. Martinez left a separate letter to be read aloud only if her will was contested or if accusations were made against Elena. Given the events of the last few minutes, I believe those conditions have been met. No, Patricia said, but her voice was weak. Please, Edward, we don't need. He was already unfolding the letter. Grandma's handwriting, shaky but legible, covered the page. If this shocked you, comment karma below. My dearest Patricia, Mr. Harrison read. If this letter is being read, it means you couldn't accept my decision with grace. It means you stood at my funeral and made a scene about money instead of mourning your mother. I want you to know that I saw this coming. I knew you would do this, and I prepared for it. Mr. Harrison's voice continued, steady and clear, reading Grandma's words. Patricia, I watched you become someone I didn't recognize. You were such a sweet child. Do you remember? You used to bring me flowers from the garden just because. You'd curl up next to me and read books for hours. You were kind. You were genuine. Then you married money, and something in you changed. You became hard, strategic. Everything became a transaction, a calculation, a move in some game I never agreed to play. Patricia's face crumpled. For the first time since this whole nightmare began, she looked genuinely devastated, the mask finally slipping. I gave you everything, the letter continued. The best schools, the finest clothes, every advantage money could buy. And you repaid me by treating me like an asset to be managed. When did I stop being your mother and become your inheritance? When did you stop seeing me as a person and start seeing me as a portfolio? My father was openly weeping now, his shoulders shaking. David, my son, you're no better. You let your sister dominate you your entire life. You stood by and said nothing while she orchestrated this family like a corporate merger. You chose her approval over your mother's dignity. That's your legacy. Mr. Harrison turned the page. To my grandchildren, Madison and Trevor. You represent everything wrong with inherited wealth. You were given every opportunity and squandered all of them. You learned to take without giving, to demand without earning, to expect without appreciating. I watched you become entitled, shallow, cruel, and I blame myself for that. I should have taught you better, but I also should have stopped enabling you years ago. The letter paused there, a space on the page where Grandma must have stopped writing to collect herself. But Elena, my sweet Elena, she chose nursing over money. She chose service over comfort. She chose me over everyone who told her I wasn't worth visiting. She sat with me on my worst days, when I couldn't remember her name, when I thought she was her mother, when I was angry and confused and frightened. She never flinched, never wavered, never treated me like a burden. I was crying now, hot tears streaming down my face, but I didn't care. The room could see me break. Let them. So yes, Patricia, I'm leaving everything to Elena, and I want you to know why it hurts you so much. It's not about the money. You married into more wealth than I ever had. It's about being rejected by your own mother. It's about facing the truth of who you've become. It's about realizing that at the end of my life, the person who mattered most to me wasn't the daughter I raised, but the granddaughter you all dismissed as irrelevant. Mr. Harrison looked up from the letter. It's signed Rose Catherine Martinez and dated March 15th. The signature was witnessed by Dr. Chen, Dr. Patel, and myself. The silence that followed was absolute. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The family portrait had shattered and everyone was staring at the pieces, trying to figure out when it all went wrong. Patricia stood frozen for a long moment, her face cycling through emotions too rapidly to track. Then she turned to me, and what I saw in her eyes was pure, undiluted hatred. You'll never be family, she whispered. You can have the money, the houses, all of it, but you'll never be one of us. Good, I said quietly. I don't want to be. That broke her. Patricia let out a sound somewhere between a scream and a sob, grabbed her purse and stormed toward the door. Madison and Trevor scrambled after her like loyal dogs. Several of the guests followed, clearly uncomfortable with the drama, eager to escape before things got worse. My father remained standing in the middle of the room, looking lost. He opened his mouth several times, trying to find words, but nothing came out. Finally, he just shook his head and walked away. shoulders slumped, defeated. The room emptied quickly after that. Nobody wanted to be associated with the family scandal. Nobody wanted to take sides in a war they hadn't seen coming. Within 10 minutes, the mansion was nearly empty except for Mr. Harrison, the catering staff, and me. "I need to sit down," I said, my voice barely audible. Mr. Harrison guided me to a chair near the fireplace, the same chair Grandma used to sit in when I was little, when she'd tell me stories about growing up during the Depression, about meeting Grandpa, about building a life from nothing. "She planned all of this," I said, not really a question. "Every detail," Mr. Harrison confirmed, taking the chair opposite mine. "She contacted me 6 months after her diagnosis, said she was having more lucid days than expected, that she wanted to use them wisely. We spent dozens of hours together over the last 2 years, updating the will, gathering evidence, preparing for exactly what happened today." "The recordings?" "Her idea. She said she needed to protect you from their accusations. She knew they'd claim manipulation, undue influence, that you'd taken advantage of her illness." He smiled sadly. "She was remarkably clear-sighted about her family's flaws." "I never asked for any of this," I said, gesturing vaguely at the mansion around us. "I just wanted to spend time with her." "I know." She knew. "That's exactly why you're sitting here now." Mr. Harrison pulled out a business card, placed it on the table between us. "You're going to need help managing all of this. Legal advice, financial planning, property management. I can recommend people, or you can find your own. Whatever you choose. Don't rush into any decisions." I picked up the card, my hands still shaking. "What do I do now?" "Whatever you want. That's the point." He stood, preparing to leave. "Your grandmother gave you freedom, Elena. The freedom to live life on your terms, without struggling, without compromise. Don't waste it." After he left, I sat alone in that enormous mansion, surrounded by wealth I'd never imagined having, in a house that felt like a museum to a family that had imploded. My phone buzzed. A text from Patricia. "This isn't over." I deleted it without responding. It was over. Whether she accepted it or not, it was done. I spent the next hour walking through the mansion alone, really seeing it for the first time. Every room held memories, Christmases when I was young, before Patricia's kids were born and everything became a competition. Summer afternoons in the garden with Grandma, learning to plant roses. Grandpa's study, still smelling faintly of his cigars, though he'd been gone 15 years. But mostly I thought about those Tuesday and Thursday evenings at Riverside, the way Grandma's face would light up when I walked in, the way she'd squeeze my hand during scary parts of movies, the way she'd whisper, "I love you," even on days when she couldn't remember why. That's what they'd never understand. Patricia, Madison, Trevor, they thought this was about money. They saw the inheritance as a prize, something to compete for, something I'd stolen through manipulation and cunning. They didn't understand that I'd already received my inheritance. I got it in card games and movie nights. I got it in moments of clarity when Grandma would tell me stories about her life, her fears, her regrets. I got it in every Tuesday and Thursday for 2 years, in every hour I spent as her granddaughter instead of her heir. The money was just Grandma's way of saying thank you, of making sure I'd be okay after she was gone, of giving me the freedom to live without the crushing weight of student loans and double shifts and studio apartments in bad neighborhoods. But the real inheritance? That was love. Real, unconditional, earned through presence instead of performance. My phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't Patricia. It was Jennifer, one of the nurses from Riverside. "Elena, I heard about Mrs. Martinez. I'm so sorry. She loved you so much." I smiled through tears. I loved her too. "She left something for you here. A box. She said to give it to you after... well, after. Can you come by?" "I'll be there tomorrow." I walked to Grandma's casket one last time. She looked peaceful, finally free from the disease that had stolen her memories piece by piece. I touched her hand, cold now but still somehow comforting. "Thank you," I whispered, "for seeing me, for trusting me, for everything." I locked up the mansion and drove back to my studio apartment in my beat-up car. Tomorrow I'd deal with lawyers and accountants and property managers. Tomorrow I'd start figuring out what to do with $28 million. Tomorrow I'd face whatever legal challenges Patricia tried to throw at me. But tonight, I just needed to be Elena Martinez, the nurse who loved her grandmother, the woman who chose presence over profit, who measured wealth in moments instead of money, who understood that inheritance wasn't about what you received, it was about what you gave. I fell asleep thinking about Tuesday evenings, about card games and old movies, about a woman who saw through the fog of Alzheimer's to recognize real love when it sat beside her and held her hand. If this story moved you, hit that like button. Comment justice if you believe Elena deserved this. And subscribe because I share stories about real people facing impossible situations and finding truth in unexpected places. This channel is about honoring genuine connection over performed loyalty, and I've got more stories that'll make you question everything about family, inheritance, and what we really owe each other.